Kurt, thanks for joining us today for the Advisory Board podcast. I appreciate you
But
joining. So guys, I want to do a quick intro. This is a friend of mine, Kurt Hurley, right now currently head of marketing at American, oh my gosh, AFC. Help me out here, Kurt, help me out.
American Family Care.
Holy cow, choice kept coming to my mind. I'm like, what in the world? It's not a choice. Okay, thank you. American Family Care. You guys just got some great awards. I saw some stuff in the news about you. Congratulations for being another year of top franchising. But
Thank
the
you.
important part of Kurt's intro is not what he's doing now. So Kurt Hurley he was the drummer in the Wild Boys. If you haven't heard some of their music, you should definitely look them up. Boys with a Z. He was Abs in 60 Minutes. Was that the program that you put together?
Yes, something along those lines.
Yeah, 60 Days. Abs in 60 Days is
Right.
what it was. But Kurt's he's a wizard when it comes to marketing strategy in the world of franchising. How long have you been doing that, Kurt? Tell us a bit more about yourself.
So sure. As Dave mentioned, this started 25 plus years ago, and it originally started with the marketing of my band, which subsequently led us into a recording contract with a independent label and major international distribution with a major label. And so it was not only left into my hands to market us as an unsigned recording artist into a signed recording act, and subsequently doing that on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood, we became the largest drawing act in Sunset Strip history, drawing about anywhere between 1,000, 2,000 people to every show that we were, playing at, be it at Gazzari's, the Troubadour, the Roxy, the Whiskey, the Country Club, whatever it was in the greater Hollywood area. And so it was my job to really kind of enable that process to attract that sort of audience. And incidentally, what ended up taking place was the fire marshal, the West Hollywood fire marshal, got involved and said, we can't have this. There's way too many people attending these shows. So what we agreed to do with the fire marshal was to usher in, groups of 500 that could see us for 15 to 20 minutes at a time. And because we were headlining, we were playing an hour and a half, roughly around there. So it would enable our entire audience to at least see us for 3 or 4 or 5 songs, whatever, the circumstances held. And they would usher them in and out. And so everyone who purchased a ticket, everyone who showed up and were standing in those long lines were able to see us. So that's where it all began. And it subsequently evolved into several other things, principally being the Baywatch trainer. I was the original fitness trainer for the television show Baywatch, which is, again, the most watched television show in history. And so I was fortunate to be able to work with the cast and crew of that original television show until it went to Hawaii and Australia and other places. And so, at that point, I realized I was more of a marketer than I was anything else. Although it really started with, entertainment, moved into fitness, and then evolved into the foundation of what I found myself doing. And that's kind of more or less what I'm doing today is multi-location, multi-unit, multi-site, and or franchise marketing. The one-to-many format where you can uniquely market a franchise business hyper-locally, effectively, to where it's not only a local community entity, but to where it is also a recognized national leader in that particular space and or global leader in that particular space. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Yeah, sorry, I tuned out after I realized you were the one that gave the Hoff his hot bod. I didn't realize you had done that either. That's impressive.
Well, let's put it this way. I may not have been the, crucial element for giving him the gift that he calls his physique, but I was able to at least curtail some of the onset of things that could potentially have gone wrong with his physique in that process.
Yeah.
If that makes any more sense.
I think I can see where you're going with that. That's awesome. Kurt, thanks for joining us. I'm as excited about having you as a guest. The topic that we're going to talk about today is pretty interesting because it's not something that a lot of the franchise community or multi-unit, multi-location dealer networks that I'm working with are thinking about generally right now. So thanks for seeding the idea and making time. Let's jump into that for a second. So what we want to talk about, we're going to talk about franchise marketing, but a unique subsector of it that's not getting a lot of attention now. First, tell us, Kurt, from your perspective, since you've been in it for so long, things are pretty dynamic right now and fluid. What are you seeing right now as kind of key trends in franchise marketing, FranDev, that people ought to be paying attention to right now?
Yeah, certainly. So first of all, Dave, I want to say thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And, as you kind of hit on, what's the nucleus of that, with regards to franchise marketing and the trends, therein, it's interesting because there's been a significant pivot or multiple pivots that have taken place over the last 6 to 8 months. And in that process, and to begin kind of, with the core of what, I'm going to say, we're seeing the birth and the evolution of virtual discovery days, which were unheard of prior to COVID. So a bit of disruption, based on the pivots that were absolutely required that had to take place in order to endure the lockdowns and the offsets, and the shakeup of franchise business. Many of them have been forced to either shut down or curtail business or to modify how they were going about doing business. From the franchise development side, that idea of still being able to maintain doing discovery days, but doing it in a way that was more meaningful. The birth and, like I said, the evolution of what is now being referred to as virtual discovery day, which incidentally, from my perspective, can be profoundly more impactful than a discovery day. And I'll tell you why. Because there's such contingency that rests on this idea of a discovery day. But you get on a plane, you go to a different city, you partake of the business at headquarters, you get to meet some amazing people, you get to see and partake in the day-to-day of these amazing turnkey operations and marketing functions that you were never previously, privy to. And that's all awesome stuff. But now you can do that in the privacy of your own home. You can do it from a unique digital to human perspective. And if franchise brands are really good at this, they've been able to parlay the best of what they did in a discovery day and provide a virtual experience that never took place prior. And I kind of have coined the phrase, the digital to human experience version of that discovery day. So much rests on that new digital to human virtual discovery day that, as you know, did not exist prior to COVID. So that's a new thing. And because much rests on it, the kind of elimination of the wining and dining, the glitz and glamour, and the nurturing of the benefits through, an on-site intensive that used to take place. Now these intensive value-add elements have come into play where it's really now all about the actual opportunity versus the benefits of the opportunity. See, before it was you kind of go through the process, you get to see it, get to meet some amazing people, see the turnkey functions, but you really didn't get to immerse yourself from the unique human perspective to partake of that discovery day from your own perspective. You're there as a part of the hoopla, right? The glitz, the glamour, the whining, dining process.
Sure.
So now it's become central to the experience of the individual versus the experience of the day. And so super important. And
Let me share a
go
thought on
ahead.
that one. No,
Step right in.
well, this is something that I've seen pretty recently, because now, before, I had never once been, you typically wouldn't invite a strategic supplier to a discovery day before, right? That would just be a little unheard of. It's like, no, our staff, our people, maybe a top local franchisee, and that's all that you're going to see. You're surrounded by just this nucleus of the staff of the operation. But what I've seen, just from my perspective, is I've had multiple franchisors now invite us to their discovery days, so we can provide some strategic insight as a third-party perspective about the value of their franchising opportunity. And what I've seen is, at least psychologically, is people tend, I think that it provides a lot of value, one, because you've got experts from the outside sharing a little bit more depth about, and a rich story about why their brand is being successful. In our case, sales automation, CRM, that kind of stuff. People get a little excited about it, and then it breaks up the monotony of just listening to the same 3 or 4 people. But then you've also you parade 4 or 5 outside expert vendors or suppliers or partners through the door, showcasing why what this franchise system has put together is absolutely top notch. It's got way more potency, I think, now than just sitting around and listening to a CEO and a head of franchise development talk about how amazing everything is. It's really a completely different experience, and now a lot more rich and even more in depth, giving a lot more value than I think they used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, to really kind of, take that to, the level of where it really becomes impactful. Technology, for better or worse, is here to stay, and the lion's share of it is better. And so, for a prospective franchisee to participate and partake in the conveyance of the value add of that technology, those technologies that are specifically needed for multiple facets of that business by today's standards, for them to get that sort of immersion into not just what the CMO or the COO or the CEO has to say, but really what that experience is like from the vendor perspective, and how that particular vendor and that particular technology plugs into the mix that takes place within the turnkey of operations. That is incredibly informative and impactful to a prospective franchisee now in that prospect of experience of discovery that did not take place to that degree prior to COVID. So absolutely, couldn't agree more.
Totally agree. And I mentioned this before, maybe a month or 2 ago, but there are some groups out there that are they do a lot of physical media things, like let me think, like kitchen tune-up's a great example, where it's products, and you learn the tile and the counters and all these things, which they used to have in a big training room. Well, now they're spending, I want to say she said like 90 hours or something to prep for, this is now post discovery day, they've signed up and now I've got to train, right? But there's so much more prep and things that need to go into it to make it execute well. But there's something very potent about receiving this package. And I know some people do virtual happy hours with their discovery days, and there's something that adds it opens up the door for a lot of creative thought and engagement that's not the traditional. And that's another thing that I like about it. But you can send the package and people can be tactile and still enjoy some of what would have been an in-classroom, face-to-face experience remotely if you get creative with it. And I've seen some people do a great job of that, like Heidi and her team.
Yeah. And, that feedback loop is incredibly important for the continued perpetuating growth of the turnkey pieces or turnkey elements of a franchise model, franchise concept. And again, prior to COVID, some of those experiences simply didn't take place. You know, the feedback loop takes place with regards to what, you know, franchisees experience in the field upon opening, with regards to, let's say, their marketing, what's working, what isn't, what technologies, you know, tend to be super helpful, others that they're not seeing the, you know, or realizing the value and impact of that particular technology. Those feedback loops typically took place in the first 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year.
Mm-hmm.
They're taking place now, even before launch. So yeah, and look how those franchise brands are evolving from that perspective alone, because that feedback loop is becoming more thorough and efficient, and the cycle is faster. The learning curve, I think, is also, you know, a more predominant factor in that process as well, because we're learning things before, you know, we were significantly, you know, in a 3-month interval, 9-month interval, whatever that, a year, month, or a year, or 2 years. We're learning things much quicker now because of this. And, you know, we're forced to find solutions to problems we were never facing. And, you know, hate to say it, that's all good.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's no, I guess there are rough things, you know, even, you know, like personal, like cancer, but even that, any of these challenges you find within your business, the worst thing you can do is not find them. Honestly, that's my personal opinion. So the fact that the feedback loops are getting faster and more effective, and the fact that you get, I don't know, I think there are a lot of value adds to these virtual discovery days, but I mean, let's not talk about the expense. I mean, it's a lot easier for someone, and someone else mentioned this before a while ago, but there's a lot lower threshold to get to a discovery day, which means people that might have been sitting on the fence with this franchise opportunity, maybe for whatever reason, the sales process, the franchise, development process wasn't as effective as it could have been. They show up to a virtual discovery day and then like, light bulbs are going off and now I'm ready to sign up. I've had several people tell me that that's happening, where before someone who's on the fence wouldn't drop the $1,500 and spend a half a week and fly on their own dime to go and do a discovery day. And so, yeah, that's another major advantage I've seen of this shift, is people are signing more franchisees that probably never would have made it to that stage.
Absolutely. And you know, a subsection of that particular topic, when it comes to the, you know, mechanisms that have emerged out of this that, you know, play into the discovery day concept, is that, you know, where content and collateral have become more consumer centric. They become more keyword centric, keyword focused. And so because there is less contact prior to a discovery day that you know would have taken place, there's more content to feed that person in the funnel,
Mm-hmm.
that prospect, and that content has become very keyword focused, very keyword centric, in the sense that it's answering questions to a greater degree, and it's answering more questions
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, prior to this last year, simply there was no need for that. I mean, sure, some franchise concepts were producing lots of FranDev content to you know, fill in the gap. Like, for example, at Restoration One, I created content specifically based on inquiry that I had when new franchisees would onboard and they would partake of my marketing training. I would ask them questions, how they found the opportunity, what questions were answered, what questions weren't, where they feel we fell short, all that stuff. And I started providing answers to those questions to enable that funnel to be filled from the top to a greater degree. And now it's even become more vital for that sort of content to fill up the top of the funnel and to fill up those touch points throughout, the life cycle of that funnel. Even though the life cycle is shorter and people are more convinced when they do attend a virtual discovery day, there's more content now for them to differentiate this brand from that brand and see what they like about this brand versus that brand. And so again, this has forced, the creation of more consumer friendly content to emerge and to answer those pending questions that simply either weren't being asked or if they were, it was after the fact. And now we can create content to address all that stuff in advance, to leverage ourselves, our brands, and to emerge, to differentiate ourselves in that marketplace. And some of these marketplaces are relatively cluttered. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I had an interesting interview a couple months ago with Erica Tarnowski over at 919 Marketing. I don't know if you know them. They're pretty close to you. They're North Carolina. Yep. But they, one of the things she brought up was what I've observed as well, is that there was well, she didn't say this, but the content marketing trend, about a decade ago, everyone started to shift to content marketing. SEO became more powerful. Let's get more content out there. But the other thing that happened at the same time is people started to convert at a much higher point in the funnel. So people weren't ready to buy. They just wanted to get that white paper to get more information so they could get more informed in their consideration phase, or, zero moment of truth type of stuff. But what happened, so the pendulum swung far that way. We started getting a very high volume of unqualified leads that weren't ready to have a conversation. And Erica was talking about the same thing you are, which is smart marketers in this franchise development world. They're putting out higher quality content that answers the key questions, so that funnel, that consideration phase, you don't want the people looking at your franchise that aren't ready to invest. You don't want people looking at your franchise concept and getting further down the road and tying up your resources in FranDev that are going to find out it's a bad fit because they don't do technology, and your technology company that just happens to restore homes, right? Like that's not what they want. So I think you're spot on that the content strategy has to become richer. And you have to become, you're doing getting nerdy, you're doing, independent, direct research in your marketplace with buyers, and then filling in the knowledge gaps. I don't think many people are doing that. Do you see a lot of people doing that?
No. I think it's the smarter marketers. I think it's the smarter organizations. I can tell you, 2 years ago, I had this conversation with many people, and some of them were some power players in some, high C-level positions in organizations. They absolutely said, you know what? I don't need marketing. I don't need marketing to close my deals. And literally they were closing deals with, brokers at 40, 50 grand a pop. Whereas at Restoration One, I can tell you, just by creating more content, those prospects were converting at less than 10 grand a pop, because of the amount of content that answered those key questions at the right point in time throughout that prospect journey. And I will bet you those people in those positions are no longer in those positions today. In fact, I heard it not too long ago in a conversation with a director of franchise development. Absolutely said the same thing. He said, I don't need a marketer. I don't need content. I don't need anything. I can close these deals. And I just went, you know what? That is so 1990. And you know what? It's going to be to the detriment of that organization over the next year, when they realize that that guy has circumvented a great deal of what could have taken place, and expediting the cost to convert and reducing that cost to conversion because of that sort of poor decision making.
Yeah, and this is the time to push the pedal down, because what I'm hearing from all of the franchise brokers we deal with, FranDev groups internally, there are a lot more people that, overall volumes of leads may not be up, but the quality of the candidates has gone way up. And a lot of people shut off marketing and panicked and put their heads in the sand. Smart people were like, oh no, like I see what's happening. They invested heavily in their marketing. And
Absolutely.
I knew people that in the middle of April, in the middle, like kind of the heart of the pandemic, when people were panicking and freaking out, they were like, we've never closed more deals in our lives. No joke. They're like, yeah, we've got 9 new franchisees in the funnel right now that are about to sign. And then the only issue that they ran into was funding. That the SBA loans got screwed up from PPP, so they just had to wait for funds for the loans to fund. But some of these guys are just crushing it because they saw that it wasn't the time to put your head in the sand. It was the time to invest.
Right. And the cost of those ads are less, and the cost to convert is less. So
yeah, it was crazy. But that's, I guess, you see that with experience. Some of the younger folks, I think, panicked, or the old timers that didn't know how to handle it. But I saw a lot of people really close a lot of deals because of that.
Yeah. Listen, at the end of the day, creating, publishing, and distributing content and doing it prolifically, that is the key.
Mm-hmm.
You heard it 25 years ago in marketing. You heard it 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and you're going to hear it even more prevalently today, specifically with digital marketing, but in all mediums. Content is king. Thought leadership is the queen to that content. And what ushers in that unique prospect in this particular process and reducing the cost of conversion for that process is indeed content, having lots of it, answering those key questions, and just simply being the differentiator in that crowded marketplace, and recognizing that people want to be spoken to on their level with the sort of content that they want to consume, and then crafting and creating content to address from that perspective. Highly crucial, highly critical to the success of building a franchise brand today.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Great advice. As we were talking before, and this is a great segue point into talking about another trend that you'd mentioned to me about multi-unit sales, and tell me a little bit, give a little background into that if you want to maybe revisit part of that discussion, because FranDev is great. Everyone wants to close a franchise location, but you've noticed a few things that I thought were really deeply insightful that I'd love for you to share about, like what's the difference between just selling franchises and really focusing on multi-unit sales?
Okay, so and I think what really kind of birthed this particular area of our conversation was really this idea that there is a pretty significant shift for power players within franchising, and I certainly see it today with not just multi-unit franchise or master franchisees, but multi-unit, multi-brand franchisees. Those have really gotten smart. And the same thing goes with this particular approach. Now, not everybody can afford to just, pull millions out of their pocket and buy 3, 5, 8, or 12 locations and in a nutshell, dominate a particular marketplace, area, a region. But, to become a part of an organization that's doing that is relatively easy to do. And to form your own serious business organization that approaches franchising from that particular unique perspective, becoming this master franchisee by virtue of buying power and approaching the business from the idea of dominating a market space that isn't dominated by this particular concept. And let me elaborate. There's this idea of critical density or critical density area development, where you put in 3, 5, 7, 10 units of a franchise brand in a particular area. Not only are you going to dominate that area, but you're also going to create a bunch of sub-components that amplify the value of dominating that area. And again, not everybody can afford to do that, but if you can't afford to do it, then absolutely do that, because the key to franchising, and as we continue to evolve, and that's not to say that the single unit franchise holder cannot be successful.
Hmm.
Um, and in franchising, that's typically been the, the key model that, but things are evolving. And if you're looking to, like I said, to really kind of control a market space and the dynamics within that market space, then you approach it from that perspective. But the key to that is, again, clustering, critical density area development, to where you're putting 3, 5, 10, 12, 15 units in a certain market area, and you're dominating that space. Absolutely 100% dominating that space. So that's really kind of what born that particular area of the conversation you and I were having.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about, so the idea of critical density, where did you first start to see that? I mean, because it almost seems crazy sometimes how many Jiffy Lubes you can see in a community, or how many gyms you can find in a community, or I mean, restaurants, or quick serve restaurants, your Subways or other people like that. Like, it seems like there's a Subway on every corner in some parts of like Manhattan, right? They're just everywhere. So Starbucks. Where did you first start to see that, and what are the benefits? Because when you talk, the scale is the benefit there, from what you told me before.
The scale is the benefit. However, like you can scale a single unit, you can scale 15.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been there forever. If you look at how they started franchising McDonald's way back when, to evolve into every other major quick serve concept that dominated the market, and the evolution of, like you said, Jiffy Lube and other auto specific, be it parts houses or even plumbing supply houses. There aren't one, there's many of that, and something relatively obscure as a supply house for plumbing and plumbers and plumbing companies. So it's always been there, but no one really talked about it, and no one really put a great deal of focus, because the idea was to sell as many single units as you possibly could. And of course, there's control of territory and all that stuff that comes into play. And I'm not an operations expert, so there are factors of it that I'm not going to touch on. But from a marketing perspective, it's always been there. And so of late, it has really emerged in smaller franchise brands that are looking, for example, in the car wash sector,
Mm-hmm.
where that's exactly what they're doing. And their success is incredible, and it's far reaching, and it's affecting communities. And what it does is it effectively touches on, utilizes, employs, and deploys all factors when it comes to the marketing mix that single unit franchise owners simply could not afford to do. It reduces the cost of reduces cost of overhead. So you have the divided overhead concept.
Mm-hmm.
You increase brand recognition, as well as reputation, and the reputation of that brand within that particular specific market space.
Yeah.
You're just better, more able to effectively market and develop more effective marketing campaigns in that area, like you were never able to do before. You have market command. You have better handle on the dynamics within that market, because you have domination of that particular marketplace. And, so many other elements are affected. Sure, the initial investment into a franchise concept is significantly greater. You need more controls and more buying power and more tools and technologies to to play this game. But again, if you're looking at it from the perspective where you want to dominate a market and you want to be incredibly successful versus just holding down a day job,
Yeah,
that's what's taking place, within the constraint of franchising. But it's always been there, Dave. And I think now it's just the smarter organizations are taking advantage of it and they're utilizing that. And you're seeing that on the franchisee side to where those groups that are doing that, where they have 15, 20 units in a particular area, they're simply doing significantly better than those single unit holders because they're doing it not simply because of those factors I mentioned, but because they're utilizing all the power of that organization to penetrate and dominate those markets.
yeah. They're getting what do you call that when you're getting synergy, because you've got multiple locations, multiple messages going out for the same brand in the same region. You start to get a lot more recognition and penetration into mind share, which I find interesting. Logistically, on the back end, I was thinking, even marketing wise, I own 4 locations of a franchise in one market. I've got one management fee for my marketing firm, and then I got to spend a much higher ratio of my marketing dollars on actual ad spend or lead generation versus just administration costs, which can also be a massive scale opportunity. At least those are some things I was thinking of after our discussion. But
Yeah.
you mentioned that the performance is better typically, and I see this too, because typically you see the multi-units buying up a lot of the subpar or middle of the road performers around them, and that's how they start to grow. What do you typically see as far as performance metrics for the multi-unit franchise owners versus the single?
So again, this does not affect every player within the single unit franchise owner, in some small, out of the way area where something like territory command doesn't exist, or even market command. So, but those who are in highly centralized area where there's critical density of population, as well as prospective consumers, customers, clients, what ends up taking place is, you mentioned the reduced cost of being able to play the game of advertising and marketing, right? But you didn't mention the lower cost to convert on those ads because of that particular market domination in a specific area. Now, marketing agencies, vendors have utilized this particular approach to reduce on their end the cost, but they didn't always extend that reduction in cost to customer, right?
Yeah.
So now you can not only leverage that particular reduction of cost or ad spend, across the organization, but you can leverage that with your vendors as well. And that's all good. And that's not to say that, vendors are bad and they're out to take advantage. I'm not saying that at all. Mm-hmm. But, the cost of doing business has just that. It has a cost. Yeah. And it's always had that. But now we can positively affect those costs by approaching it from this perspective of that multi-unit, multi-location, critical density development perspective that simply was not being utilized to the degree that it is today and will continue to be, used going forward because of that. All that stuff is effective. And yes, I mean, you talk about performance and outperforming, it's 3-to-1, it's 5-to-1. Some areas it's 10-to-1. Yeah. And then you marry that with reduction of cost. And look at that, cost of conversion goes down and cost of doing business goes down with vendors and control over vendor integration goes up. You're no longer just a customer to a vendor. You become a vital component to the livelihood of a vendor, as it should be. It's a partnership. It's a strategic partnership, right? So all that stuff becomes win-win-win across the spectrum, because of all these things that have been put into place that enable the franchisee to now become not just a player in a market, but to really command that market and the territory of that market. So, it's like I said, it's just win-win-win across all layers. And yeah, it's a 3, 5, 10%, improvement in performance or 3x, because of all that stuff, and taking advantage of the tools that you now have in your arsenal that you previously didn't have. So it's exciting. It's exciting for me to see that and to be a participant in that, and to be able to wield a little bit of energy in that space.
Yeah. When the thought that comes to my mind is, okay, so they tend to perform better. It's a better influx of capital for a franchisor, but that doesn't tend to be the strategic focus of franchise development, is to always try to market to and find people that are interested in multi-unit, sometimes multi-brand franchise opportunities. Now, there are groups like Authority Brands, where they've got in-house, they've got 6 solid brands, 7 solid brands that sometimes overlap very nicely. That's not normally the case, but how do you shift your marketing, your messaging, your collateral content to try to attract somebody who's in that category? Because if I were a franchisor, I would want to just bring on multi-unit folks. It's an easier training and deployment process. Train once and then manage one relationship and have access to 6 successful territories. That's a dream come true. So how do you focus on that, or have you found a way to crack that code?
So yes, and this is really kind of a twofold answer. The first thing I want to touch on is the fact that you're not affecting advertising and penetrating that prospective single unit prospect. You're not doing away with that. But much like everything else we've already mentioned has evolved, so has that marketplace. Say, not just the space, but the marketplace, which means there are more prospective consumers of that particular model than there ever has been. It's like with anything else, to say, well, it's great that we are producing the smartphone, but a smart tablet, that's really not us. I mean, almost anyone who's producing a smartphone is also producing a smart tablet, right? If not, or a smart device of some sort, be it a watch or a laptop, desktop, whatever. Just like there is a market for tablets and laptops and desktops, there is a marketplace for this sort of prospect, just like there is for a single unit prospect. So it's producing content that speaks to, in a very personalized way, because they're more discerning, they're smarter, they're likely millionaires. It's got to be comprehensive to the specific queries that they would be putting into, searches themselves. And so, again, I'm going to go back to content and say it's creating not just the content, but the content engine to support that segment. Yeah. And to understand that there is a segment that is that group of people that I have defined, just like there's a segment over here, and just like there's a segment that is only interested right now today in a tablet, or right now today in a laptop or desktop, and not specifically a smartphone. There's a market for that. And so it's It's developing the marketing engine specific to satiate the demand of that market.
Yeah. You know, I do an exercise with people when I do some consulting or even training for like the Small Business Development Council, which is teaching people how to really identify a persona profile and really get down into, you know, demographics, but psychographics. And then walk them through the next level exercise, which is now, how do you find their watering holes? Like, how do you identify these characteristics, and where do people with these characteristics congregate? Where do they go to find their information? What associations are they part of? What lifestyle choices do they make? Like, how do you get in front of these people? Have you started to find that there tend to be some, for specific brands or specific concepts, there are places where you can really nail these people down, or you can get in front of them?
Yeah. So let me step back and say this. So again, technology becomes a significant factor in how we do this.
Mm-hmm.
Starts with the use of technology, the right technology. You know, Nielsen has a product called the Prism Study, and it does exactly that. It gives you all that consumer data specific to this particular segment that enables you to understand not just who they are, but where they are. Based on the, you know, like the criteria you mentioned. It's not just demographics or psychographics, behavior, persona data. It's all that stuff integrated to where you have a snapshot of who they are, what they are, where they are, and what sort of messaging resonates with that particular marketplace. Now, do you have to use some good old-fashioned marketing ingenuity, intellectual capacity in that process? Sure. You still have to be discerning. You still have to be a human being overseeing and analyzing every factor that is, you know, component to this. But
Mm-hmm.
nonetheless, the use of technology and the use of market data and tools to procure that market data to better understand how to better serve, you know, that's why when you first step into marketing, you're not able, even though you may, you know, have, you know, the pie in the sky concept. I call it the third eye factor, you know, because at the end of the day, it takes years to understand all these things we're talking about to their utmost, and how to utilize, to how to employ and deploy these things to serve you, the marketer, as well as the organization, as well as the market, right? And so it's all that stuff coming together. But at the end of the day, if you do it right, you do it seamlessly, and you do it in a way that is motivational and encouraging and is enlightening and enables everybody who's a participant on the team to throw their 2 cents in and to begin a new feedback loop to grow even this area of topic to where it becomes a better servant to us as marketers, to the organization, and to the franchisees. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's when there's a will, there's a way. And then once that meets critical mass, then the third eye takes over, and we're able to see things from a entirely new and enlightened perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing you said before that I just want to call attention to now is I don't think you can, even with the market research and everything else, I think the best source of data is that primary research, asking your new franchisees, where did you hear from us? All the things you mentioned before, where you started to get some insights in a previous role. I don't think there's a good way around that data, because you can get such good qualitative data from people about what triggered them. Even if you know they found you on LinkedIn, what was it about the ad that caught your attention? What questions did you not have answered that we had to answer for you? Like, all those things start to really fuel that pipe. So I love that you brought that up, you know, a little while ago, but I feel like that's super relevant to really fine tune the messaging, the market approach, and also the targeting, so you can make sure you're finding and attracting the right people.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that became paramount for me at Restoration One and Blue Frog to a lesser degree, was really having that feedback that was so crucial in now developing a content engine that enabled us to do just that, to answer those questions, to address those inquiries, to be a better, more prolific thought leader in that particular space. And I'll tell you specific, after Hurricane and Harvey, I realized that there simply was not, Hurricane Harvey and Irma, sorry, there simply was not enough of that sort of content to address even simple areas like content cleaning and forensics, things that became areas of damage restoration, but previously were not emphasized, highlighted, were not unto themselves revenue streams, which have subsequently become thus. And so it not only became a learning factor for me, but crucial to the development and proliferation of the marketing engine that now they're able to utilize to a significant degree. And again, if you look at it, if you're paying a broker $40K to acquire a new franchisee, and you can create content that can do it at a fourth or fifth of that cost, I'm not saying eliminate that broker, but I am saying do them both and allow things to emerge as they should because of technology. At the end of the day, I mean, I hate to say it, but if we can do this at a tenth of the cost versus this, why are we still doing this? That's what technology is there to enable us to understand, is to how to eliminate waste and how to emphasize those things that are contributing not only to the top line, but to the bottom line.
Yeah, that's a great thought. I just realized that we've far overspent the time that we had planned together, and there's still a lot more we ought to dig into here. So I think this has been a great first pass at least exposing the content of some of the new changing things in the market, but also this idea of how do you really get after multi-unit franchise sales and find people, target them. I think we ought to do a follow-up on this as well, and maybe jump into strategy to attract, and even more detail about the content creation strategy to bring in that type of a candidate.
I'd love that. We'll call this part 1, call that part 2, and then I think that's a great idea, Dave.
Yeah, well, let's do it. Kurt, I really appreciate you coming and joining us. This is great content. I took a ton of notes. I'll share some of this tomorrow, and then look forward to getting the second round scheduled so we can dive in a bit deeper too.
Thank you, Dave. And again, the pleasure was all mine. I am grateful that you had me. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.